Chapter 8. Homecoming. Kent had too much free time on his hands. Having been left upstairs with no easy way down them for the better part of a month, he began to relish the times he was forced to spend time with the squad, and covet the times he was not. Without the ability to do much of the activities they did in their free time, Kent was left alone with little to do except scroll through channels on the TV in his room. To his own bewilderment, a month's worth of solitude had bored him of his usual loves, racing, car auctions, and instead became hooked on watching golf. Not one for sports, though was golf really a sport, or was it just a game with a bit of exercise? The mind-numbing regiment of watching a tournament from beginning to end had become enough of a comforting distraction in the week after the stress test that he began to actively long for the next one, like some sort of middle-aged white man's drug. Even without a full tournament, the Golf Channel often showed highlights, cycling through the best bits of the past year, which was usually enough to keep Kent occupied mentally for an entire empty evening. He figured when he was given the chance he might be pretty good from having watched so much. He knew he was right-handed, he knew the proper way to swing a club, the constant commercials had seen to that, and could probably strategize a full round once he'd figured out his distances. The issue came from obtaining a set of clubs, and then finding someone to go with him. Emma seemed the likely candidate. Rich kids and politics probably went hand in hand with a game like golf, though he got the impression that Margot might have some experience too. Part of him felt a bout of guilt obsessing over the game. Golf was what had caused such a rift between his parents so many years ago. Having built so many courses around his properties, Kent's father would have been naturally drawn to it, but the issue came in how much time he spent away from home, and then who he was making the rounds with, until finally it became too much for one side of the coin and the whole penny dropped. Moderation, he thought over and over while watching. If I get the opportunity, I'll play in moderation. There would be no golf today. Instead, Kent woke to the sound of hammering rain outside his window. Against primal instinct, he managed to crack one side open, and raindrops flooded the polished concrete below. It was the first fresh air this room had seen in months. Glad to finally have permission to move his leg, Kent leapt from the floor to his bed, and to his pleasant surprise, there was no pain, not even the slight sting where the break had been. The doctors had pronounced the initial recovery time as 7 months, though last week both parties were surprised to find that the period had now been reduced to 2. One of the nurses mentioned that the same hollowness and shape of his bones which made his running so fast was now causing them to heal faster. Now he wanted to show off, to run around the city as fast as he could without a care in the world, but a heavy gust of rain splashed once more on the floor, and his plans canceled themselves. Not until he stepped foot in the shower did Kent remember what day it was. Emma's words echoed in his ears like she was there in the bathroom with him. Why did she hate him so much? What had he ever done except try to be nice to her? He could see plainly that she didn't have many friends. Maybe it was because of her dad, the same reason she seemed so paranoid about people trying to get close to her, that she had so few. Now with Jordan and Margot out of her life, the only person she seemed to gravitate toward was Johnny. Kent remembered how she had described him before, and every time he saw the pair together in the living room, a knot of pity boiled in his stomach. It was like watching a girl only ever spending time with her dog. Maybe Liz was right. Maybe it wasn't worth his effort to keep extending olive branches Emma's way. All that had done was lead her to insult him, and now here he was having wasted his time with her all the while he could have been venturing outside the squad, trying to find another date. It would not have been hard, but now here he was taking Liz as, what, a courtesy? Her and her weird friends he had never met before? Liz had been another person he would have guessed had no friends. He figured she just did the same as him, locked up in her room all day and night, waiting to be included by the others. At least he had an excuse. For her, he just thought that she was shy and awkward, uncomfortable around new people, though now that he had thought about it, it had been her who invited him to watch her show. And now he found himself thinking about England, and her family more than his. It was as though a new side of himself had emerged from somewhere he'd never expected, a side he would rather keep hidden from everyone else. There was no strength and compassion. By the time he was dressed, the rain had somehow become worse. Down in the kitchen, he expected to find everyone else, mainly Margot, fussing about her outfit or something similar. But instead, the sole occupant of the couch was Liz, who was half watching something on BBC America. "Hi," she sighed, noticing him rushing down the stairs. "How's the leg?" He ignored her question. "Where is everybody?" "Emma's parents took Johnny to breakfast for his birthday," she explained. "The others must have gone too. How's your leg?" Again, he swept over the question. "They didn't invite us?" "Didn't think you'd be so bothered." She yawned, standing up from the couch. "And honestly, I don't know that's where the other two are. They could be still sleeping for all I know." Once more she added, "How's your leg?" "It's fine." He swiped. "Great, actually. I don't feel a thing." "Feelings are good sometimes," she joked. "But you meant pain," he assured. "I don't feel pain anymore." He looked around the empty common room. "I thought Johnny's birthday was yesterday," he remembered. "Yeah, well, we were all a bit busy yesterday, weren't we?" she noted. Kent frowned. "But nobody said anything." Liz beckoned him closer, as if to tell him a secret. Confused, knowing they were alone, he leaned down to let her whisper in his ear. Loudly and sarcastically, she whispered, I think he wanted that. He grimaced. Johnny's constant act of humility was starting to wear on him. You know, you're allowed to throw me a whole party for my birthday, he announced. I don't know when it is, she dismissed. August 15th, he winked, grabbing himself a bowl of cereal. When's yours? 23rd of December. Ooh, a Christmas baby, he lured, pulling a spoon from the drawer. Not quite, she argued. Close enough, though, Kent patted. I'll remember to do something for yours. Even if I wanted you to, which I don't mind. You can't, she explained. I'm going back for holiday. Back? As in England? No, Pakistan, she fended. Of course England. Kent blushed. He wasn't used to her being so quick with him. I'll have to come with you then, he claimed. Do it there. Liz laughed. I'm trying to imagine you trying to sit with my family for Christmas. Why, what's wrong with me? Nothing, she smiled. I've just never seen you with kids is all. It was true. He had no experience with kids. He was the youngest in his entire extended family, and even if there were others, he would never have gotten to spend much time with them. How many? He began. Oh, I'm the second of 6, Liz interrupted. Older brother, younger sister, twins. Both boys, those two. Just turned 6. Well, that's not too young, Kent defended, now trying to imagine himself entertaining them over a roast turkey. Where's your brother? He asked. The older one. The color drained from Liz's face. For a moment he thought something had happened to her, but a second later she regained her composure, and staring at the cabinets behind his head, answered, He's dead. Kent opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came. Liz clenched her teeth, still avoiding his gaze as though she were about to cry. I'm sorry, he said plainly. She sniffled just once before finding his eyes again and saying, We've all got our things. He was suddenly overcome with the urge to learn more, but knew this was something she was very far from being ready to discuss with him, so he tried to put it out of his mind. An awkward pause only lasted a minute, as the sound of a keycard unlocking the front door preceded the other 4 bursting into the room, drenched from head to foot despite the girls carrying closed umbrellas. You know you're supposed to open those to use them, he cheeked. Emma shot him a look. They're not much use when it's blowing sideways, Margot argued. Some trees might help, Emma growled. Welcome to Wyoming, joked Jordan. Despite the cold, his face remained red, as though embarrassed, and Kent thought he saw Jordan strategically tucking his chin, hiding something beneath his neckline. He rushed off to his bedroom to get changed out of his wet clothes, as did Emma. Margot and Johnny joined them at the counter. Where'd you go? Liz questioned. Lambeth, Johnny stated. Margot jumped in. It's this cute little B&B in Old Town, literally in the living room of this old house, surrounded by, other actual houses. I don't think they really do the bed part anymore, but there's only 5 tables, so it's super exclusive. Literally everyone in there was embassy. Kent looked at Liz, who looked back for just the briefest glance. Both seemed to be thinking the same thing. Was Shane there? Kent stabbed. Liz looked again, this time a glare, accompanied by a warning shake of her head. Neither Johnny or Margot noticed. He said he wanted to be, Johnny claimed innocently. He flew to Poland last night. The program over there is in danger, I guess, with their whole, election thing. What election thing? Liz asked. You guys haven't heard about the stuff in Poland? Johnny looked astonished. Margot nudged. John, you're the only one here who cares about foreign politics. It might not be so foreign, he continued, oblivious to the reality of Margot's comment. Back in June, there was that snap election in Poland. You guys familiar with Milo Chervinsky? The 3 nodded indifferently. I heard the name, Margot spoke. Well, Johnny continued, he belongs to far-right party in Poland, which basically threatened to forcibly remove the current president if he refused to resign from office. The current president, Marek Bozek, was trying not to appear corrupt or something and arrest them all, and decided to try and embarrass the movement by challenging them to a surprise election. Chervinsky won. The president refused to accept the results and vacate office, but the movement marched on Warsaw and started nationwide protests in retaliation. Bozak had the UN and the EU on his side, though, so he agreed to another snap election and threw all the money the government could fund at his second legitimate election, and trying to prove that the first one was a fluke. Liz looked up at Johnny. This was a few weeks ago, wasn't it? I remember you watching something. Let me guess, Kent interrupted. Chervinsky won again? Johnny nodded. It wasn't even close. Now he's in office with 80% approval ratings. But don't you guys want that? Kent argued. I thought the IRA was super conservative. Margot rolled her eyes. There's a difference between conservative and a psychopath, she shrugged. I have heard about this guy. Even then, it's not the platform, it's what he's doing with it, Johnny explained. He's currently leveraging state secrets against the European Union to get approval for a nuclear arsenal. Kent nearly spit out his cereal. Like that would ever work, he choked. A few hidden scandals for nuclear bombs? It already worked, Johnny rebuffed. UN just voted in favor last week. Kent was unable to follow the line of logic. I'm sorry, he went on, but a few state secrets and the rest of the world is just giving them nukes? Who do they even need them for? Their argument was presumptive, Johnny continued. They're surrounded on either side by Germany and Russia, and the man's running on a platform on national individuality. It fits. His people are all for it. Yeah, but what kind of leverage does he have against every country in the world? It wasn't every country, Johnny stated. Just the big ones. The ones with voting power. Okay, then what does he have against them? Kent continued to argue. Obviously something the rest of the world shouldn't know about, or... He stopped to think. If the major countries are a majority, it would have to be something the governments don't want public to their people. Liz's eyes grew wide. Us? Kent stared back. What? He leveraged us, she said again. What do you mean? Kent, you know we're not public, right? Margot rattled. Surely your mother told you to keep your effect a secret. Well, yeah, but... He stopped. He never considered there might be consequences if someone actually believed him. Hold on, I thought the company was independent of the government. It is, Johnny agreed. But it didn't start that way. The experimentation and all the fallout from it, those are extreme top-level secrets. I bet our president doesn't even know the entire truth of us, or even that we still exist. The embassy would see to that. Kent frowned. Then how would Chervinsky know? Someone royally effed up? Margot joked. So that's why Shane left? Kent prodded. To go salvage things in Poland? I don't know if it's that simple, Johnny guided. But if the secret did get out about someone like us to someone like Chervinsky, then the Polish program might be in serious danger. Why would they be in danger? Because the exact same thing happened in the 80s, Liz recalled. The Iranian program was wiped off the map. Then why don't we just assassinate the guy? Kent asked. And make him a martyr? Johnny pointed out. That's the exact sort of thing he's currently warning his people about. Besides, offered Margot, do you want to pull that trigger? Because that seems just the perfect kind of job for Xander's dream team. The conversation on Poland ended there, as Emma emerged from her bedroom toweling off her hair while dressed head to toe in black. I suppose I should start getting ready too, Margot stated. Kent looked at the clock above the stove. They'd yet to even pass noon. It's not even lunchtime, he argued. How long can it possibly take to get ready? Liz looked at him with the now familiar disapproving glare. Kent, you need to spend more time with women. By 5 o'clock that evening, the rain had only increased. Kent needed little time preparing. After another shower to wash off the minimal exertion of walking to the school for lunch, his outfit consisted of the simplest of suits, a black coat, black pants, white shirt, and black tie. It was the only thing he owned. Spraying himself liberally with what was also his only cologne, he tossed up his short hair and returned downstairs to the common room. There he was met by Jordan, who had put a bit more effort into his look, most certainly at Margot's request. His speckled hair had been done up similarly to Kent's, but their similarities in attire diverged there. Every single item on his body had plainly never been worn before, and was perfectly tailored to Jordan's lanky frame. The three-piece suit was a bold burgundy, with a tie striped in silver and gold to match. Kent had never realized before that Jordan's left ear was pierced. A diamond stud outlined in gold shone brightly in place, matching the tie, a golden tie chain, and a golden wristwatch which peeked proudly beneath his sleeve. To complete the collection, a brand new set of brown shoes stood firm atop the floor, perfectly polished. Nice suit, he wanted to say, but he knew that Jordan could not honestly return the compliment. Any jealousy he had for the outfit was overtaken by jealousy for the date as soon as Margot exited her own room. Margot was hot before the dress. Every boy in town knew that. But where Margot had previously felt accessible to Kent, her current glow took it to the maximum. She no longer felt safe. She looked dangerous. Side by side with Margot, Jordan's suit looked darker, more purple, and almost blood red. Her hair was woven into a loose braid, swung to the side over her bare shoulder. A kind of sash hid the other, and came down diagonally to wrap around the matching dress and blended into a hidden tie behind her waist. Her long white leg was exposed on the side by the thinnest of open slits, under which Margot hardly tried to hide a matching leg garter. Close your mouths, she said, hardly looking. You'll make the rest of us look stupid. Jordan and Kent caught each other's eyes. Both had been ogling Margot as she left the bedroom. Jordan shot Kent a death glare. As she approached, still fixing one of her earrings, Kent realized why she looked so threatening. Her makeup was significantly heavier than usual, her eyes dark and heavily shadowed, and as a result she looked older. The difference was so startling she could have walked into a liquor store completely unopposed. Jordan seemed nervous too. You look... he started, choking on several adjectives and unable to secure one. I know, she replied damningly. Just then Johnny emerged. In stark contrast, every item except his shoes were blue. A navy jacket and pants preceded a baby blue shirt, which stood as a background to a striking plain turquoise tie. His ensemble lacked the nuance and pizzazz of Jordan's, but it was still custom fitted, and also put Kent's to shame. At least his hair too was the same, though it was growing longer. He was followed almost immediately by Liz, who Kent hardly recognized. Her usual arrangement of black on black or something in between gave way to the polished version, a sleeveless ebony thing which cut off just below the knees, accented at the very extremes by sequins of the same color. The color worked perfectly. It was sleek and sharp and managed to mask any shadows that would have exposed her imperfect figure, the way that Margot's dress accented hers. The bushy tangle of hair which usually sat unkempt atop her head had been sprayed down and straightened, tucked into a neat bun which looked almost too correct. Kent had grown so used to her roughness that, taking it away, Liz was close to unrecognizable. He was not attracted to her the way he was Margot, but she still looked attractive. If there was a perfect version of Liz, he figured this was it. "You look nice," she lied, loud enough for the other three to look their way. Margot looked the pair up and down and only now seemed to piece together the coordination. "Are you two going together?" she asked. "Yes," he thought, almost speaking the words aloud out of spite. Liz spoke first. "No, there's a group of us going," she said. "So, I guess, yes, actually, but not like, you know." She gestured between them. That's when Emma's door opened. As soon as she exited her room, Kent's face turned red with rage. Whatever Margot had done to her accessibility, he thought, Emma had found it. On either side of her tanned face, Emma's yellow hair was looped back into a straight tie with the rest of it, leading as far as it would go halfway down the circular opening in her back. She was not lacking makeup, but whatever she had done, it looked almost identical to her normal face, just accenting it the way that pulled out the best parts of her features. The shape and texturing of her dress was not dissimilar to Liz, but the dark shine of black sequins was instead made from a sparkle of smooth fabric, with little spiral and floral patterns hidden in the dress through the blending of materials. Her jewelry was entirely silver, bedazzled with a collection of earrings all up the sides of her left, while 2 necklaces adorned her illogically exposed neckline. The lower was plain steel, a cross. Everything popped vividly against the color of her skin. She looked utterly beautiful, but how she looked was only fuel for Kent's anger. The cause was the color of the dress. It was turquoise. Coming toward them and standing amongst the group, it was abundantly clear whose tie her dress matched. She was flaunting Kent's failure straight to his face. She was not just going with Johnny. She was going with Johnny. She was taking her dog to the dance. "That should have been me," he repeated on a constant stream behind his eyes. "Holy hell!" Jordan exclaimed, earning a backhand on the upper arm from Margot. Emma smiled. "I don't look 12 anymore?" 13 at least," he repeated. Another slap. Johnny had not stopped blinking. "Wow," he finally broke. "I'll take that as a compliment," she smiled. "You look bloody brilliant," Liz lauded. Emma gleamed, as though there were no higher compliment. "Thank you," she grinned. "But look who's talking." Kent wanted to vomit in his mouth. The only thing worse than watching the girl he wanted go carelessly with someone else was watching her trade fake pleasantries with his consolation prize. "We better get a picture," Margot said, pulling out her phone and crowding them all together, reasoning that a first school dance together was a worthy first picture to place in their shelf of empty frames. Kent feigned a smile. His ears ringing and heat rising to his face, all 6 made their way to the ground floor together, where the others disappeared in a crowd of familiar faces while Kent followed Liz to the pouring night. Everything in him wanted to stay, to fight for what was his, but Liz stood in the doorway staring back at him, the look on her face telling him exactly what he did not want to hear. Give it up. The ringing grew louder as he left the building, where it was gradually replaced by the abundance of rainfall. Before he could apologize for lacking an umbrella, he realized neither was getting wet. With a hand over her head, Liz was creating a shield of purple energy which deflected the drops in every direction but on them. A number of students walking near them were given dirty looks, as though envious of Liz's abilities. When they entered the school through the main doors, they were met by a wall of dripping bodies. Though the dance had plainly started, the noise coming from the cafeteria hall was deafening. A heavy majority of attendees were waiting for others to break the ice. Liz took his hand and pulled him left down the equally cramped concessions hall, which was already taking a line of patrons, and did not stop until they were at the end near the bathrooms. "They're really not doing this in the gym?" he shouted over the noise of conversation. Liz didn't answer. She pulled a phone from her chest, began typing, and then paused to look up at the crowd. A smile lit up her face as she waved to what could have been any number of approaching students. Eventually, it was obvious which 3 were Liz's friends. A ghoul of a girl led the pack. Not quite as tall as Kent, but so thin that she looked giant in comparison. She wore a plain 2-piece outfit consisting of a plain black top and a skirt so eye-catchingly short he had to force himself not to look at it. Underneath this, to some degree of modesty, she wore thick netted leggings, which darkened her otherwise bleached skin. Every bit of jewelry, there was plenty, and her makeup was all black. To her left was a very wide, very short girl with long brown hair who waddled their way in what Kent could only compare to a white and black potato sack. There was no dimension to her outfit whatsoever, falling over her body from a seam atop her shoulders with nothing else to show. It was at the same time too long for her body, and she was obviously struggling to move in the dress which neared her ankles. Last was, by default, the most forgettable of the three. A girl with a round face and small elfish features stood no taller than the other, but obviously had some sense of fashion that rivaled the dress Liz wore. All black but not nearly as bright or flashy. A bunching of fabric on her left side made the pattern look like the center of a sun, with rays of similar fabric stretching outward to the extremes of her neck, shoulder, hip, and knee. Her shoulder-length black hair sat straight and sheen, with a pair of barrettes pinning bits back to her outline of tiny ears. Her small beady eyes were outlined gracefully like Emma's, and a pair of round crimson lips had slightly crooked smile which squinted her eyes and made them even smaller. "Hi," the last girl said, reaching out a hand. "I'm Morgan." Kent returned the gesture. "Kent," he replied, shaking her warm hand. The ghost girl shot forward. "Reyna," she said quickly, hardly touching Kent's hand before shooting it back and then fidgeting with her black fingernails. The girl in the potato sack kept her hands together, and shyly whispered, "Everly." "Nice to meet you," he said kindly, though he had yet to decide if that was true. Reyna kept picking at her fingers but looked Kent thoroughly up and down. "You're cute," she noted. "Like, really cute. How did Liz score you?" Unsure whether to be embarrassed or flattered, Liz answered before he could respond. "We're not here together," she said flatly. "He's one of us." "He's definitely not one of us," Reyna denied. "Look at him." Again, a confused cluster of emotions caught in his throat. "If you ended up without a date, I feel a little less embarrassed," Morgan chirped. For an angry second, Kent wanted to respond, but Morgan's eye twinkled, and he could have sworn that she threw him a wink. The others appeared not to notice. The conversation shifted to Reyna's boyfriend, and she went off on a winded essay Kent was only half listening to. His attention had moved to the crowd around them, and almost wondered if they had not all overdressed. The upperclassmen had clearly not put in as much effort as someone like Emma. The girls continued babbling about relationship trouble when the hall began to empty. The music on the other end was getting louder. "Shall we?" he interrupted, gesturing to the thinning congregation. "Why not?" Liz said, eager to move on the same as him. It was standard pop radio, nothing he hadn't heard a million times back home. The effectiveness was in the atmosphere. A great black curtain had been dropped over the championship banners, and the music video for each song was projected onto it in real time, creating something to watch for the many students like Everly who seemed to enjoy sitting along the outside of the floor, rather than actually dancing. The tables had all disappeared to some unknown storage closet, and now the tiled floor was completely empty, save for a large DJ setup in the back corner, where lights and lasers were illuminating the haze coming from machines in the other corners. No curtains had been placed over the windows, so occasionally the sky would light up alongside the colors inside, followed by a successive boom of thunder that shook the building even more than it already was. He spotted groups of a few others he knew from their classes, as well as Emma's brother Andrew, who appeared to have already ditched Janine and was instead having a boisterous conversation with a red-haired girl in green. Margot and Emma were across the room chatting with a handful of attractive girls they must have known from previous years in the city. Jordan and Johnny were nowhere to be seen. For a second he thought Margot might have gestured him over to the gaggle, but both not wanting to be rude nor misread the situation, Kent stayed put, surrounded by the other three. About 5 songs in, Reyna, who had moved to clawing at her already scarred forearms, nearly keeled over when she spotted her boyfriend, Eric, who then approached them cautiously, looking as uncertain as Kent at what was happening. Apparently, Reyna had ignored his text for the previous 3 days after having decided to go together. The other girls became progressively as confused as the boys, Morgan asking Eric where his other date was, and Eric proclaiming in the most bewildered voice that he did not have another date. At this, Reyna basically threw everything she had on the floor and ran out of the school into the rain, with Eric desperately running after her. Liz and Morgan looked at each other, then over at the chair where Everly had been, which was now empty. "And then there were 3, Morgan breathed perplexedly. They stood there a bit more exposed, while Liz and Morgan tried to piece together what had happened with Reyna. Kent was growing increasingly bored. By the 10th song, his desire to be there, or even his reason for coming, had left him completely. A slow song began to play through the speakers, and suddenly he remembered. "Before the end of the night, I'll get her to dance with me," he thought. But Emma had disappeared. Standing alone on the floor where she had been were Margot and Jordan, tied together so closely he was surprised they could even breathe. A boy approached them wearing a simple black dress shirt, unbuttoned to nearly his belly button. A gold chain sat beneath, highlighting his tan skin. Paying no attention to the other two, he looked at Liz and said in a thick Australian accent, "Hey, you're at Andrew's sister's squad, yeah?" Liz looked at Kent. "Emma?" she asked aloud. Yeah." The boy completely ignored her answer. "Mind if I take you for a dance?" Liz was stunned. She'd clearly not expected anyone to make a move on her. Again, she looked at Kent, and then at Morgan, who nodded eagerly in her favor. She stumbled. "Sure." He took her hand and pulled her to a clear area of floor, close to where Emma's brother was still in heated debate with the red-haired girl. That left Kent alone with Morgan, who grinned maliciously. "Well, that was fun," she said. "Just you and me now, I guess," Kent replied kindly. "Oh, no," she wondered aloud sarcastically. "Guess I gotta dance with you now." "Don't worry about it," he assured. "I'll be back. There's somebody I have to find." He left her standing there, only realizing later how rude his dismissal had been. But with the song already into its first chorus, his time was winding down. A half hour until the first slow song? That gave him, 5 more opportunities at most? He did not want to wait that long. His eyes darted around the room, circling the floor, trying to spot the turquoise dress. It was difficult with the changing lights, but eventually he spotted her. To his dismay, she had defaulted to Johnny, and the pair were stepping back and forth awkwardly as though they wanted to be anywhere else in the world. "Well, that's a good sign," he thought. "I can catch her for the next one." He watched them from the other end of the room until the song was over. They didn't even seem to realize they were dancing. They were just talking, as though this was the most normal setting in the world to just have a chat. But Kent could see a chance to swoop in before the next one. He just had to pay attention. When the song was over, the pair dispersed in an awkward sort of way, with Johnny returning to Jordan's side after he and Margot had finished a minute-long kissing session. Emma was talking to one of the girls from earlier, who was standing alongside her own date, a plain-looking boy in a pink tie to match her bright dress. Liz and Morgan returned from their own ends of the floor. "And?" Morgan pried. "His name is Ethan," Liz blushed. "He's heading back to Australia for a second semester." Morgan grinned. "You still got time." "I really don't think it was like that," Liz replied. "Definitely a friendly sort of thing." "Worth a try, though," Kent piped up. "Not interested," Liz swept aside. "What are you interested in?" Kent found himself wondering, but managed to keep his mouth closed. Eventually, they were swept into a circle of older students, none of which seemed eager to introduce themselves, but instead provided a place to feel less exposed. Kent kept finding himself between Liz and Morgan, as if they were clinging to him for protection. A large crackle of thunder shook the building in a space between songs, and Liz, echoing the audible scream from a number of the girls, grabbed his arm in response. A half hour later, the music once again slowed. Immediately, Kent's eyes shot to where Emma's group was stationed. In the chair near the edge, Johnny sat alone, his eyes down to his hands where they rapidly scrolled through his phone. Margot and Jordan were again tangled on the floor nearby. "I'll be back," he dismissed himself, only then realizing his hand had been holding Liz's. He rushed over to Johnny, who did not look up from his reading. "Have you seen Emma?" "I think she went to the bathroom," he replied blankly. Back in the hallway, a crowd had once again retreated, and it was obvious by the look of those off the dance floor why. He squeezed his way through the concessions line and over to the bathrooms, hoping to wait her out. A minute later, he realized how awkward he must look standing outside the girl's side, and trying to avoid some kind of weird reputation from one of the onlookers, bolted inside the men's room, pretended to wash his hands, and then retreated back to the hallway, where he thought he saw Emma walking back to the floor. He almost grabbed her shoulder before realizing the girl's dress was green, and it wasn't Emma. Pausing for a few seconds to give a comfortable amount of space between he and the girl, just in case she were to notice, he reached the corner to go back to the floor, where to his surprise and infuriation, the real Emma was back out dancing, again having found Johnny. Kent swore silently to himself. If he had just waited... Determinedly, Kent stared her down even after the song was over. If he had to resort to using his speed to swoop in the next time, he would. "She break your heart or something?" Morgan appeared below him. He stuttered, breaking his eye contact with Emma and blinking her out of his mind. "What?" he managed. "No, I just... It's normal," she said apologetically. "They tend to congregate together, don't they?" He wasn't following. "Who do?" "The locals," she said. "I can tell Liz feels it too. It's like we're interrupting their perfect little world. I have 3 in my squad too." Kent looked more intently at Morgan. She was sipping from a red plastic cup. "Punch?" she offered. "Where is Liz?" he asked. "Probably bathroom," she indicated. "She said she wasn't feeling well. I told her I'd keep you company, but then she rushed off." Kent looked toward the hallway, then back at Emma. "So tell me about her," Morgan continued prodding. "Who?" he blurted out louder than anticipated. "Emma," she deduced. "Liz told me you have a huge crush on her." "Yeah?" he grumbled. Kent was determinedly not happy with Liz talking about him behind his back. "What else did she tell you about me?" "Oh, loads," she lied sarcastically. "Nothing. Just that you guys hang out together while the locals go off and leave you behind." "That makes me feel really good, thanks." "Don't whine about it," she retorted. The same thing happens to me." Kent kept his eyes on Emma. "So, what is it about Emma?" Morgan deduced. "I mean, I know she's the PM's daughter, but you're not after her because of that, are you?" He looked back to Morgan. "How do you know that?" "Well, because if you were after her for power, you'd be making more of an effort," Morgan chided. "You wouldn't be waiting so long to make an actual move." "I've made actual moves," Kent defended. Keep saying no. Morgan shrugged. That could be a sign. Stop saying that, Kent rallied, and seeing Morgan's confused look, added, Liz is always saying that. All right, she said, holding up her hands. Who are you anyway? Kent nudged. How do you know Liz? Oh, I don't, really, she admitted. We're an art club together, that's pretty much it. Kent rounded. Then why is she telling you things about me? Maybe because you're her only friend. Yeah, I know I'm her only friend, he said hotly. Why do you think I was so surprised to hear that you guys were coming with her? Well, maybe because we're nice people and we care about her, as little as we know her. You think you're the only person here struggling to fit in? She turned her head inquisitively. Kent's face felt hot. So, why her? She said again. A boy who looks like you, why aren't you here with anyone else? Because I didn't try, he thought, though somehow he figured Morgan already knew the answer. Maybe if you stop putting so much pressure on yourself to be something you can't possibly be, you might be a little happier than you are right now. Kent looked back at Emma. Morgan was right. Liz was right, too, but how could he possibly admit that to her, even if she had been there? All right, he conceded. What's your solution? Well, you're going to try to dance with her again, she said. Aren't you? Obviously. And if it doesn't work, she continued, how are you going to move on? He stuttered. I don't know. She looked around the room. You're going to find the next best thing you can find. I don't care if she's tall or short. I don't care if she's 18 or 14. You find someone who's second in line to Emma with whatever bar you set, and you take them out on the floor. You forget about her altogether, and for the love of God, try to enjoy yourself. It was an honest plan. A jolt of electricity ran through Kent's body, as though he just remembered it was possible for any number of the girls in the room to be more attractive than Emma. Hell, half the girls in the room were more attractive than Emma. And as he continued to look at his options, he started to really wonder why he was so set on Emma in the first place. Morgan's plan was going to work. There was no reason for it not to. Another 4 songs later, it was time. He expected it, but as the first few notes of the third slow dance played, the sight of Emma and Johnny coming together a third time was just as irritating as the first. For the briefest moment, he considered rushing in and stealing Johnny's spot, but he realized how stupid that would look. Not just to those in the squad, but everyone watching around them. It wasn't romantic, it was weird. The next one, he conceded again. Morgan nudged him with her elbow. He looked around the room, spotting a number of beautiful girls, some of whom he recognized from the halls and some of whom were complete strangers. There was one particular girl, a tall brunette in a yellow dress, who he'd noticed a few times throughout the night, but she was now dancing with another guy. The girl in green, who he'd thought was Emma, was also nearby, but she too had her hands around the neck of a date. In fact, everywhere he looked, all of the girls on the dance floor who had already been asked and taken by other boys, and those who stood alone, were nowhere near up to Kent's standard. Behind the girl in yellow, Andrew must have made up with the red-haired girl, as they were now dancing even closer than Margot and Jordan. Even Radley, the boy who had so foolishly made a pass at Emma in the lunchroom, had found his own date. And behind thick round glasses and heavily banded braces, she could be mistaken for the happiest person in the world. And he was alone. And he had failed. And to make matters worse, Johnny and Emma were no longer just swaying side to side, but actively dancing. He was spinning her around like they'd practiced it 100 times, and she was smiling bigger than Ken had ever seen her smile. Then she caught his eye. Still dancing with Johnny, Emma was sneaking glances over at Kent every chance she could manage, and still smiling from ear to ear, rubbing in the naked truth that Kent wasn't the one dancing with her. Enraged, he turned to Morgan. Come on, he said. You're dancing with me. He took her hand and dragged her closer to Johnny and Emma, her face as surprised as Liz's had been during their first slow song. He had never danced with anyone like this, but that didn't seem to matter. Putting his hands around Morgan's waist, she continued looking up at him as though she was actually enjoying herself. A voice in his head said to stop looking at Emma, so he forced himself to stare back at Morgan, and saw his face reflecting back at him in her large brown eyes. A piece of her hair had fallen from her barrette and now stood awkwardly down in front of her face, so he swiped it aside and wrapped it behind her ear. Trying desperately not to think of Emma, he pulled Morgan closer, and she buried her face in his chest. He closed his eyes, trying to focus on the music. The lyrics were something about a photograph. The picture, he thought at this. I'm going to have to remember this night forever with that stupid picture on the shelf. He opened his eyes and looked down at Morgan. Her eyes were closed too, and her smiling even bigger than Emma. At least she's enjoying herself, he concealed, and tried with everything in his power to share in some of Morgan's happiness. Then the song came to a close. Morgan backed up and looked at him, her eyes shining happily. Kent thought for a moment she was going to try and lean up to kiss him, but the sound of cheering to his right finally drew his attention, as did Margot's familiar voice, yelling, "Yes, finally!" Turning with gritted teeth, he saw plainly alongside everyone else in the room, Johnny kissing Emma. who opened her eyes and stared dead at Kent before continuing the embrace with her new boyfriend. He ran off without even saying goodbye to Morgan, bursting through the doors and not even caring that Liz wasn't there to keep him dry.